Morning, everyone. I'll call the hearing to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. So I'll introduce the members of the panel. My far left is Mr. Maurice Therian. My immediate left is Ms. Lynn Nesbitt. My name is Stu McPherson. I'll be chairing the hearing today, representing the City of Winnipeg Assessment Taxation Department, Mr. Ryan Valderrama, and the recording secretary today is Ms. Kelsey Harrison. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised, comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council. It's independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. If you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave, and the process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. Just as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Just swear the parties in, please.
Yes. Could you please state your name?
Ryan Valderrama.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Could you please state your name?
Ryan Yusuf.
And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Just as housekeeping, if you have a cell phone, please put that on silence. Morning, Mr. Neufeld. You're here representing the property owners of 22 Grant Avenue, and there are 3 points of appeal, but it's just the amount of assessed value we're dealing with this morning?
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Valderrama, the property we're dealing with is 2200 Grant Avenue.
That's
When you're
correct.
ready, we'll hear your evidence, please.
Okay, there will be a recommendation on this one, and if I may just read through the first page. So check. The property is a file number 19-2266. It has a roll number of 1000-644-7100. It is located at 2200 Grant Avenue. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using reference date of April 1st, 2018. There are 2 assessments on this property. The first one is assessed as an institutional property with a liability of taxable. It has an assessed value of $1,356,000, and the next one is assessed with a classification of institutional property with a liability of exempt. It has an assessed value of $12,513,000. It has 1 to 2 stories, 5 sections, effective years built of 1974 to 2014. It has a masonry bearing walls with an average wall height of between 10 to 15 feet. It's zoned as BR3, RR5. It has a land area of 774,793 square feet, a planned area of 99,048 square feet, and a gross floor area of 146,293 square feet. And I would like to make a recommendation on this one, Mr. Chair, based on $3.25 per square foot land rate on the taxable side, or taxable assessment. So the assessed value will be from $1,356,000 down to $1,102,000 rounded.
I'm sorry, $1,000,000?
$102,000 rounded.
That's for the 40 taxable?
That's correct, sir.
Thank you. And the exempt?
There's no changes on the exempt.
So So that amount is, can you give us that amount?
Oh, again, the exempt portion is $12,513,000.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, you're aware of this recommendation?
Yes, we discussed it. The matter goes back to 4 reassessment cycles, and they're all under appeal at the municipal board. And we've been striving for some time to come to an understanding and good intentions on both sides, but failing to follow through with a final deal. I think we are in agreement on principle on the values. We just need to get this moving along. So what I said to Mr. Boardroom is we're prepared to accept this recommendation on the basis that it kickstarts the resolution of the others based on numbers already been discussed.
Thank you. Mr. Therian, do you have any questions for the assessor?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt, questions, concerns? Thank you. So, Mr. Neufeld, no further presentation on your part?
No, the number was 1,100,000. Is that correct?
102. 1,102,000. It came as a calculation.
Oh, that could be a deal killer. Just kidding.
I do have one question. Are you withdrawing?
No, we're waiting for instructions from the owner. I don't think we'll be proceeding on class or liability, but I need instructions on that.
Okay, so the onus being on you, you're just asking for them to be confirmed as they are.
That is correct.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Neufeld.
Thanks.
Are you gentlemen together?
We are. For a period of time. Let's call it a trial relationship. Sorry, that was a pun.
Period of time, I like that.
I'm ready.
Could you please state your name?
Human.
And you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Bradford Scott Boardroom.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
As a housekeeping matter, I'm wondering if it might expedite the process somewhat and get Mr. Newman out of here in a timely fashion if we can reorder these slightly. So if we can hear numbers 4, 5, and 6 in that order first, and then the remaining properties I will deal with Mr. Ballmer.
4, 5, and 6 have 3 points of appeal.
Yeah. And the last one on Kildare, that's item number 6 on this morning's agenda, deals with both classification and there's an issue of value on that one as well. But once we've heard from Mr. Newman, he can presumably be excused from that portion of the hearing on that property.
Okay, you have no objections to that, do you, Mr. Assessor?
I have no objection to that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, therefore, we will deal with them in that order. So the first item we will deal with is number 4, which is 50 Monterey Road.
No.
The 3 points of appeal. So the classification liability.
Yes, and again, while quantum, I believe, is an appeal, we do not dispute it for the purposes of this hearing. And so our argument for this property rests solely on liability taxation and classification of property.
So you're asking for the
Confirmation of the assessed value and change in the classification and liability.
Okay, we will still have to hear from the assessor on the quantum.
Yeah.
Should we deal with the quantum first, or should we deal with the liability classification? Makes no difference.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, Mr. Assessor, let's hear from you first, please, on the quantum for 50 Monterey, ensuring that we have the file number and roll number ready, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next property has a file number 19-3207. It has a roll number of 0604461500. It is located at 50 Monterey Road. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using reference date of April 1st, 2018. The assessed value is $1,885,000. That's one story, one section with an effective year built of 1968. Has a masonry bearing wall. Has construction class. Has an average wall height of 15 feet. A zoning of R1M. With a land area of 166,250 square feet. It also has a planned area of 25,003 square feet. And a gross floor area of 25,003 square feet. Moving to page 3 are some aerial photos of the subject property. On page 2 is the cost summary by building section. There's only one building section with an effective and actual year build of 1968. The plan area again is 25,003 square feet. An average wall height of 15 feet. Has an RCN of $4,505,400. And it has an overall depreciation rate of 83%, giving it an RCN less depreciation of $775,000. On page 4 are some land sale comparables. They're all ranging from $7.25 up to $17.22. On page 5 is the zoning of the property and a picture of it, or a map. On page 6, the cost summary has a land valuation on the section that says land valuation. The class and liability is 60 feet with a net area of 166,250 square feet. A net rate that's determined by the model at $6.68 per square foot, giving it a land value of $1,110,000. On the building, the second to the last section, the building value is $775,000, and the summary on the last section or last chart, it indicates a total value of $1,885,000. And on page 7 are some schools in the Louis School Division. They're all listed there with their contact info and the addresses where they are located. On page 9, some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, Public Schools Act, Education Administration Act.
Mr. Assessor, I think we'll get you to stop there. We're just dealing with the quantum right
Oh,
now.
okay, sure.
So we'll deal with the liability afterwards.
For sure.
So, not putting words in your mouth, but the assessed value is what you're recommending that be assessed at?
Yes, correct. $1,885,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Borgstrom, any questions or concerns? for the assessor?
We have no questions for the assessor on the issue of quantum.
Right.
And we have no submission to make on the issue of quantum.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Therian, any questions or concerns?
No, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt? And as you've stated, you have no further presentation to make on regarding the quantum.
That's correct.
Thank you. So we will deal with the liability and classification issues.
Thank you.
I'm assuming that's Mr. Newman that's dealing with that?
Well,
Or you have a preamble?
I think Mr. Borgstrom will start,
Okay.
if he wishes, or if not, I can just go.
yeah, we've dealt with this before, and so if I could just give you a bit of background, I have on our page 3 given you some detail regarding this building and regarding the use to which it was put by the Louis Real School Division. I have also included at the rear of our submission in support of that on pages 8 and following a number of pictures taken during our April 1st, 2015 inspection, which I attended. I believe it was Mr. Dupuy and Mr. Newman was also in attendance at that time. And Todd Hewitt from the city at that time, and My former colleague, Mr. David Sanders, was also at the hearing, or sort of the inspection at that time, although he was a less active participant. So the pictures at the rear outline the various uses of the property, including the former gymnasium as storage area for tables and other things that are periodically moved out to the schools for their use. And other than that, I think we'll turn it over to Mr. Newman.
So you've got Mr. Borgstrom's brief that he just referenced. You're also going to have a separate exemption submission. And you're going to hear from me essentially the same submission in respect of the 3 schools. I will do it extensively the first time. I will do it far less extensively the second and third time, making only very brief remarks, I anticipate.
Thank you.
I just want to, for a moment, just focus on what goes on this property. And if you look at Mr. Borgstrom's submission on page 3, he has detailed what occurs on this property. And we start with the general concept that school divisions have centralized their services to a significant extent. And so this school division, Louis Riel School Division, has put psychology services, has put social workers, has put speech-language pathologists, and has put therapy services, physiotherapists and occupational therapists into this building. Their offices are here. We walk through them on the inspection, and it is these people who provide services to the students throughout the school division. Additionally, as Mr. Borgstrom mentioned, there's a former auditorium gymnasium for this property, because this was a school at one time, so it has that gym auditorium, and it has become a storage area at which tables and staging and various other items that are used in other schools, they are transported to and from this storage facility to the other schools and used in those other schools. And then lastly, you've got central planning for all facilities and maintenance of them that also occurs at this facility. So you've got the plans for the various schools in the school division. You've got project management that occurs out of this location. So these are the things that are happening on this location. So what does all of that mean in the context of the legislation? So now let's go to my submission. And if you go to page 4 of my submission, we come to the heading, the legislation. So of course, this all starts with the Municipal Assessment Act, and it starts with 22(1)D of the Municipal Assessment Act. And tab 1 is the legislation, which I'll take you to in a moment. But 22(1)D says that real property is exempt from taxation levied by a municipality where the real property is used for a public school within the meaning of the Public Schools Act. And the Public Schools Act contains certain definitions. They include the definition of a school building, and school building is defined as including buildings used for the imparting of instruction, but I have underlined, or for offices or other public school purposes. And public school purposes, I'm going to submit to you, includes things like the therapists and the psychologists and the audiologists and the speech language pathologists. That's all part of what the education system does today. Because, and none of us, I don't think, went to a one-room school that we walked 10 miles to in the winter, but school divisions, schools have changed very much over the years. They now provide a full spectrum of services to students because they're concerned not only with presenting a curriculum, but they're concerned with the overall well-being, both from a physical health and a mental health perspective of students. And part of ensuring that students are properly able to function in a school environment is making sure that psychologists and social workers and speech language pathologists and therapists, making sure all of those people and resources are available to the students. That's what schools do today in our modern world. So when the definition of school building recognizes that it includes not only the places where instruction is imparted, but also includes offices or buildings used for other public school purposes, I would say to you that based on that, clearly this is a building used for a public school. But that's not the end of it, of course. So if we go on to page 5 of my submission, you see there I have the heading Decisions of the Courts. And there is a decision out of our courts involving the Winnipeg School Division, and that is found at tab 2, and maybe we can go to tab 2. So tab 2 involved a case, the McNamara School, where the issue was whether a school property separated from its parking lot by a third-party owned building, whether the effect of that separation was to result in that parking lot area being subject to liability and taxation. That's not the point of this case, but there are some other things that the court said in this case which become important. And if we jump ahead to page 10, to paragraph 24. So here the court starts to say that while it was not argued in this appeal, the interpretation of section 22(1)(d) and 24 endorsed in these reasons is supported by a comparison of the French and English versions. And of course I will show you shortly the French version of this. So in paragraph 25, you see a repetition of both the English version, which I've already referred you to, but also the French version. And I have it from a very good authority who, every time we do one of these hearings, looks at the French version and says to me, yes, the French version says what the Court of Appeal says it said. And if you go to paragraph 26, paragraph 26 says that the English version indicates that real property is tax exempt where it is used for a public school. The French version indicates that the real property is tax exempt where it is used for the needs of a public school. Slightly different wording, and but you can see the French version. So the reason I give you this case is really twofold. Firstly, to establish that both the French and English versions are equally authoritative, and I'll show you why based on the Interpretation Act in a moment. And secondly, to show you that our Court of Appeal has interpreted the French version as indicating that property is exempt where it is used for the needs of a public school. So now let me take you back to tab 1. And tab 1 is where the legislation is found. I've numbered the pages in hand in the lower right-hand corner. And so let me jump you ahead to page number 6 in the lower right-hand corner. There is the beginning of section 22 in the left-hand column. So on this page and the following pages, the left-hand column is the English, the right-hand column is the French, and you can see in the left-hand column that it's the preamble, which says that real property is exempt from taxation levied by a municipality. And then it goes on to give various examples of that type of property. And if we go to subparagraph D on the next page, we see the English version, which I've already referenced to you, used for a public school within the meaning of the Public Schools Act. And if we go to page 8 in the lower right-hand corner, in the right-hand column at the top, we see the French version, and as we've already seen, used for the needs of a public school. So, why does this matter in the context of what we're talking about here? It matters because, and now if we can come back to the text of my brief, so we're at the bottom of page 4, and we again see the definition of school building. And as I said to you earlier, School building includes buildings used for offices or other public school purposes. So under the Public Schools Act, a building that's used for public school purposes, and I'm going to submit to you that this building, which contains resources of the various psychologists and social workers and speech language and therapists, both occupational and physiotherapists, clearly those are used for public school purposes. Those are to assist the students in their overall well-being. That all matters because at the end of the day, if we now jump ahead to page 8, so I say to you at the end of the day, this building meets the needs of a public school, I say to you, considering the services that come out of this building. This building, if you turn to page 9, there you see I've included 2 sections from the Interpretation Act, Section 6, which says that every act and regulation should be interpreted as being remedial and given a fair, large, and liberal interpretation that best ensures the attainment of its objects. And so I say to you, what is the object of the exemption sections? It is to, because our legislature, in its wisdom, has decided that there's a public purpose in exempting certain types of properties or their uses from taxation, that this legislation should be given a generous interpretation to allow that object to be obtained. And then paragraph 7, or section 7 of the Interpretation Act indicates that the English and French version of the legislation, of the acts and regulations, are equally authoritative. And so I say to you, ultimately, based either on the language of the English version used for a public school, recognizing that the definition of school building includes buildings used for other public school purposes, that alone is enough to capture and grant the exemption to this building. But also, if you look at the French version, used for the needs of a public school, clearly this building, its sole purpose, though the only reason it's there, is to meet the needs of what goes on in the public schools, and based on all of that, you should grant the exemption. I will tell you for what it's worth that Mr. Valderrama and Mr. Boardroom and I, 1 week ago today, were in this very room and dealt with 2 properties, 1075 Wellington, Winnipeg School Division number 1, 491 Monroe, River East School Division, very similar types of uses in those buildings, and the exemptions were granted by a panel of this board. So I'm asking that you grant the exemption, the full exemption. Classification would be 40E in respect of this property. Subject to questions, that is my submission.
Thank you. Mr. Valderrama, questions for the applicant regarding the liability?
Yes, Mr. Chair. With regard to the last week's, you mentioned that there are 2 properties, correct, that were mentioned. You said that there was a decision that came out already on those 2 properties regarding 2020 classification and liability, correct?
Yes.
How about the previous ones? Do you know if they were confirmed by the board or
Previous cycle?
Yes.
They were, well, depends on the property.
The 2 properties that you mentioned. Do you remember or recall if they were both?
I think,
I believe that's the case.
both
so I
confirmed,
think for
right?
the 2018 cycle,
They were both
the exemption applications on both 1075 Wellington and 491 Monroe were denied by whatever panel heard those.
Oh, okay. And with regard to the school argument, or the presentation you made, this property, just to clarify, so I didn't see this property or haven't seen this. Were there any principal's office or teacher's office in this property?
Are you presently?
In the subject property? There are no principal's office, right?
So, well,
51.
I can tell you that there used to be.
There used to be, yes.
But currently, It is no longer used as a school. It is now used as a centralized facility supporting the needs of the schools within this school district.
Which has an administrative authority over,
Well,
or administrative function over the school division, correct? Or over the school division, or the entire school division?
It provides centralized facility for certain uses within the school division, but I can tell you quite with certainty that the school division administrative offices for this school division are located at 900 St. Mary's Road, which we'll be talking about in a moment.
Okay, and students that are in here, does this property have a student or students that are, being taught by teachers in terms of, being taught with English, math, science, your traditional?
This structure does not function as a school with teachers and students, with the teachers imparting instruction to the students.
And on page 4 of Mr. Newman's presentation, before tab 1, is it considered tab 1, Mr. Newman, or
Yes.
before tab 1?
Before tab
Before
one.
tab one.
So the text, in other words.
Yes. PSA definition towards the end. It says school building includes required or used in a school division or school district for the imparting of instructions. Is there any imparting of instructions done in this property?
Well, you've asked that question, and you've got the answer no, but of course, that's not all it says, as you know.
Yes, and I'll continue, but does not include building a part thereof, or I shouldn't say a part, or part thereof, constructed, designed, or used solely or chiefly for administrative functions of the school division or school district. So the user of this property is the school division or school district, correct?
No.
No, it's not.
So you missed a section, deliberately, I assume.
Which section?
You omitted reading the underlined portion.
Oh, used solely or chiefly, is that the one?
No.
Oh, or for offices or
Yes.
other public school purposes. So the public school purposes, does that include administrative functions of a school division?
Well, broadly speaking, of course, school divisions have to be administered by the superintendent of each school division and the treasurer and people like that, but none of that happens in this property.
Not. And
As Mr. Boardroom indicated a moment ago, the administrative offices of the school division at large are located at 900 St. Mary, and we're going to talk about that property in due course this morning.
So you'll also recall, Mr. Valderrama, that at
Yes,
last Monday's hearing, we also dealt with the property located at 395 Jefferson Avenue, which included in part Victory School and included in part the administrative offices of the Seven Oaks School Division. And in that submission, I hope you'll recall that we did not challenge the liability to taxation on the school division's administrative offices because that building is used solely or chiefly for administrative purposes.
Correct.
This is very different than that.
And if I may continue on that section that I was reading, other than those exercised by principals and teachers, meaning these are the buildings or the sections or offices in the schools that are being used by principals, correct? These are that is what it pertains to, correct?
So the way this section is set up, and it's from an interpretive perspective, it starts with the general concept of a school building is defined as being all buildings used for the imparting of instruction or for offices or other public school purposes. That's what it includes. Then it creates an exception, and the exception it creates is buildings used solely or chiefly for the administrative functions of the school division or school district. But then it creates an exception to the exception, and the exception to the exception is that if you've got principals and teachers who are occupying space, then they aren't excluded. The space they occupy is not excluded from the definition of a school building. So it starts with a general inclusion, creates an exception for the administrative offices of the school division, and then accepts from that exception space occupied by teachers and principals.
Okay, and that's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the applicant regarding the liability classification issue?
Yeah, I do, but I think we've discussed that before. Le mot besoin means the need. There's no question. So there is a difference in my view. I'm not a lawyer.
And in the view of the Manitoba Court of Appeal.
Yeah, but just the way I understand it. I just had a few questions. How many, I mean, it doesn't say partly, but how many staff in the area of school psychology, social workers, how many people work there? Would you know?
I don't know the exact number of people that work there. I can tell you that the space is not quite equally divided between what I will call the support services for the students versus the centralized facilities of the division. It's sort of a north-south division, roughly down the middle. I believe that there are more, just from our inspection of the property, I believe that there are more staff in place there, just with the presence of the offices and the occupancy of these offices, that there are more staff there related to the clinicians and that we've outlined in what I'll call the support services provided from this location.
Yeah, but because this is a very large school division, and so I was wondering the staff complement that was raised in that area. I know that the way I put it in my mind here, there's that group, and then I'll call it a warehouse, I guess, for school stuff. They're bringing in all kinds of stuff as needed in the school, and in and out is the way I understand it, by what you explained. So in a simple fashion, I'm looking at those two areas, but I was wanting to get a bit of a staff number to see, although it doesn't say partially in the legislation, I know that, but I'm still interested in knowing the impact of that group. The group, well, not the impact, the number.
Yeah.
Any numbers?
I don't have a number for you for this property.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
I just want to clarify, this property is owned by the St. Vital School Division.
The Louis Rail School Division.
Louis Rail, sorry.
Yes.
Former St. Vital.
Yes.
You can tell where I live. But it's located far outside the division. Am I correct? It's located Jefferson?
No, is that a typo in my brief? I apologize. No, it's located at 50 Monterey, to be clear, and so I'm going to apologize if there's a typo in our.
Located on the north side of
Yeah.
Jefferson between Powers.
Yeah, so on page 3, if we strike that first paragraph
Okay.
in its entirety,
Oh, there you go.
you can leave the
There's
remainder.
the second paragraph.
Yes, I apologize for that.
I just
Yeah.
focused on the first
So
one.
just
Okay, now I know where it is.
A little bit of background, this used to be the William Russell School. It
Right.
was an experiment in its day. Actually, my siblings attended this school. It was sort of an open school concept that quickly went by the wayside, wasn't particularly successful. We actually used to live just up the road on Maywood Road, but this was the former William Russell School, which is why it's set up like it is.
And these pictures at the back were taken by you?
I took them, and you'll see there at the bottom that I've made a notation that they were taken April 1st of 2015. And if we look at the bottom of page 23, I think you can actually see there on the top of Mr. Dupuis' head. I stand to be corrected, but I think that's true.
And Mr. Hewitt's head.
Yes.
With less hair.
Okay, and so
Yeah, perhaps it
has
was-
there been a change since 2015? Like that was 4 years ago plus?
Yeah, to my knowledge, the uses within this building are exactly the same.
Okay, and also just confirming, the students don't attend. This is
I'm
where
told
the
that-
staff are housed.
Well, I'm told that, and I've been told by the school division, that students do sometimes attend here, not for instruction, but for meeting with some of these support services. That was just my understanding from the school division.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was my question as well. So there are, what, speech pathologists there? Is that?
Well, there are a number of services, and I've detailed them not only on our page 3, but if you go to the rear of our submission, pages 36 and following, you'll see there the clinical services unit. And you'll see there the services that the clinical services unit provides. And then it goes on, yeah, oh, there we go, that's one side of it, right? So, yeah. So on page 37, there's a report to the community. Now, this is somewhat dated, but it does indicate at the top that the number of clinical services unit staff are 49. And so as you read through it, you can see it gives a little bit of detail about what goes on, certainly in this location as well.
So page 37 on
Yeah,
clinical services unit, that's 50 Monterey? That's the building?
I believe that's true.
It's not,
There
it's not other sites as well that would be included with this 49 staff at different sites?
Yeah, so let me just tell you that we work for all of the school divisions in Winnipeg. And in the Louis Riel School Division, these particular services that I'm aware of only happen out of this location. Now you will be hearing shortly about 900 St. Mary's Road, which is partly administrative and partly what I'll term support services for schools within the school division, things like IT, centralized copying, things like that. That's not what happens in this building, and this is the only building that houses these services that I'm aware of within the Louis Riel School Division.
So to clarify that, all of these services that they provide, there's 5 bullets. And it's possible that students make site visits here to see any of these support staff?
My understanding from the Louis Riel School Division is that students do attend. I wouldn't frame that as being the regular procedure.
It's usually on an on-call basis where
Yeah.
these services
Yeah.
will go
So-
to the student, rather than the student go to them?
My son's mother, who I politely refer to as that, is she's a social worker on a psychogeriatric mental health team. And they have centralized offices, but the majority of their work is attending other locations. So I believe that would be very similar to this circumstance.
And thank you.
I have one quick
Follow-up question, certainly?
Thank you. Are the services provided by this facility, or the people within this facility, is it just for students, or is it broader than students? Is it within the community at large, or?
No, this is not a community-based health system. And to be clear, this school is partly, I would suggest more than half, these support services, and the other portion of the school is occupied as a central repository for the maintenance needs of the school division. So they centralize out of here and go out to the different schools and do the maintenance that needs to be done in these locations, repairs and maintenance. And just to be absolutely clear, another portion of this former school building is the old gymnasium, which is now used, and Mr. Newman referenced it, it's used as a storage facility for tables and staging equipment, which is stored there and then is taken out to the schools for use in the schools, and then returned to this, and then sent out to another school, returned here, and so forth. So it has, I would say, 3 distinct uses, all of which, it would be my suggestion, are supporting the schools within the division.
Okay, thank you.
And to put that last statement in the context of the argument I submitted to you, either in accordance with the definition of school building in the English version, so used for other public school purposes, or in accordance with the language of the French version, used for the needs of a public school, all of these different services, I would suggest, fall within those definitions, and on that basis would be entitled to the exemption.
So, we know it's not providing services to the public. Is it just strictly students, or is it staff, administration?
Let's look at page 36 of Mr. Boardroom's submission to you. So here is the report off the Louis Riel School Division website, and you can see here in the description of the clinical services unit, committed to fostering student success. Clinical services unit is an essential component in that process. The staff members provide additional support and expertise for students, staff, and families, and share their services amongst the division schools. And then there's a breakdown of the different types of services they provide, and that's given in more detail on the following pages. So my answer to your question would be, primarily it's the students, but if you've got to bring the student's family in as part of the therapy to make the family unit function better, so the student can do better in the school environment, then that will happen.
Staff as well, in the States.
Yes?
But you would still think that that's providing a school service? School is not just for students, it's for staff as well.
It's the obligation of the student, and I know Mr. Valderrama in his brief has a section on the obligations of school boards. The obligation of school boards is to make sure the environment is an appropriate one for students. That means a physical environment, that means a content environment, that also means a physical or mental health environment, and if that means the staff and or the families, you know, if there's a traumatic event in a school, for example, they don't deal only with the students, the counselors come in and deal with the staff as well. It's a holistic obligation that our school divisions take on these days.
I thank you. Mr. Valderrama, we'll hear from you, please, regarding the classification liability issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may just point you to my brief on page 7. These are just to discuss the community schools in the Louis School Division. And on page 9 is the classification and liability. The first section, I think Mr. Newman has already referred to, is the 22(1)D of the Municipal Act. It indicates it's used for a public school within the meaning of Public Schools Act, or a private school within the meaning of Education Administration Act, to a maximum exemption of 4.047 hectares. And it proceeds to the Public Schools Act, meaning of the public school, an institution for educational purposes established and maintained under this act or Education Administration Act. And it goes through the Education Administration Act, I should say. Again, further defining what a private school is as highlighted, the section which provides a curriculum and a standard of education equivalent to that provided by the public schools. The next section indicates what is a public school mean. It means an institution for education purposes established and maintained under this Act or the Public Schools Act. And on page 10 to page 12, the upper section of page 12, I've also included the Public Schools Act, Part 3, Powers and Duties of School Boards and Employees of School Divisions and School Districts. Basically, this is the administrative function of a school board or a school division. There are some that are highlighted there. All of these are all the administrative duties and functions of a school board or a school division. And on page 12, just at the bottom, the Public Schools Act, as mentioned also by Mr. Newman earlier, it's the meaning of school building. And I have also attached the previous 2019 Realty Assessment Board of Revision decision on page 15 to page 16 with regard to this specific property. And that's the classification and liability that I have for this property, Mr. Chair.
So your conclusion is what?
And my conclusion is it should be taxable in terms of liability, and the classification should still stand as a 60 or other property, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Mr. Valderrama, let's look at page 10 of your brief, please.
Go ahead, sir.
So page 10 is section 41 of the Public Schools Act, and you've put that there, and you've highlighted certain portions because you wanted the board to understand that school boards or school divisions have certain obligations and duties under the legislation, correct?
Correct. And if I may, as I mentioned earlier, these are the administrative functions of the school boards or school division.
They are the duties.
And I agree.
Someone must carry out those duties.
Correct.
I'll suggest that a synonym for the word duty is an obligation. And so it starts by saying every school board shall, and then you highlighted B.1 on page 10.
Correct.
And ensure that each pupil enrolled in a school within the jurisdiction of the school board is provided with a safe and caring school environment that fosters and maintains respectful and responsible behaviors. And would you agree that sometimes in order for students to act in an appropriate fashion, to act in a safe and caring fashion, they may need counseling from social workers or psychologists?
Correct.
And then it goes on in B.3, which you highlighted, to say that all school boards shall ensure that a written policy respecting school food and nutrition is prepared for each school, correct?
Correct.
If we turn the page, subparagraph G on page 11, the school board shall employ teachers and such other personnel as may be required by the school division. So,
Sorry, which page? Sorry, I missed that one.
Page 11,
Thank you.
subparagraph G says that part of the obligation of the school board is to employ teachers and such other personnel. And you would agree that psychologists, audiologists, speech pathologists, therapists, they would fall within the phrase other personnel?
I agree.
And at paragraph K.1 down below, the school board shall identify pupils who are disengaged from school or who are at risk of becoming disengaged and establish policies and procedures to support them becoming re-engaged in school programming. And you would agree that a student might need psychological counseling to facilitate their becoming re-engaged in school programming?
I agree, correct.
And you would agree that a psychologist or a clinician would have to provide those services?
Correct. I agree.
If that clinician or psychologist had their office in a school, an actual school building that's on your list, would you argue that that area that they occupy as their office should be taxable?
I'm not sure about the hypothetical case. I haven't encountered anything like that, so I cannot answer, agree or disagree. I cannot answer it. Sorry.
And then lastly, top of page 12, subparagraph O, the school division shall select and purchase or rent school sites and build, repair, furnish, keep in order, and regulate the use of school buildings. And part of repairing and furnishing and keeping in order school buildings would require maintenance personnel and maintenance expertise, correct?
Correct.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thury, questions for the assessor?
Just looking at page 12,
Yes, sir.
and look at 1.1 at the bottom, school building.
Yes, sir.
It says includes the buildings required or used in a school division or a school district for the imparting of instruction or for the offices of other public school purposes, but does not include a building or a part thereof construct, designed, or used solely or chiefly for administrative functions of the school division. Is this premise used solely or chiefly for administrative functions? Does 50 Monterey?
We are in a position where whatever's going on here is part of the administrative functions as highlighted in the in my pages 10 to upper portion of 12.
Except I'm looking at the Public Schools Act that
Correct.
you're citing here, and I'm just looking at that section, because it stands there alone.
Right.
So I wanted to see what kind of weight you were placing on this, or used solely or chiefly for administrative functions. Is that where you guys are arguing that it's taxable?
Yes, it is. It's saying mainly because this property is being used as, from our perspective, under the administrative function of a school board or a school division.
Or used solely or chiefly?
Chiefly, meaning,
Solely?
or solely,
I'm not sure, I'm
For
reading all the
administrative-
other sections
Correct.
properly, but I'm looking at this one standing on its
Right.
own.
For administrative functions of the school division, which, as highlighted in my pages 10
Yeah,
to 12.
but is this
I
building
need-
used
Yes,
solely or chiefly for administrative functions?
yes, from that perspective, yes.
Okay,
That's
thank you,
our-
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt?
Thank you. On page 7 and 8, you supplied a list of schools
Yes,
as determined by the Louis Riel School Division.
correct.
Is there a list of schools as determined by the Department of Education, the province, Manitoba?
I haven't gone that far yet, ma'am. Maybe I should have. But I do have other lists of schools from other school divisions. And from the perspective of, for the purposes of this property, which is included in the school, Louis Riel School Division, I just included the ones highlighted by school division, by the Louis Riel School Division, as
Right.
schools, list of schools.
Right,
that they
so the Louis Riel School Division itself hasn't identified this as a school,
have.
this specific
no,
address.
Yes, correct.
But I'm questioning whether you were aware if the province of Manitoba has.
I haven't gone that far yet,
Okay.
ma'am. But
Thank you so
I'll
much.
take that into
Thank you.
notice. Thank you. Ma'am, sorry, what is it again? What is it
It will
called?
be the province of
Province of
Manitoba under
Manitoba.
their education department, whatever it's called these days. I don't know if it's there. I don't think it's under legislation. Thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Valderrama, part of this building we've heard is used for storage, and that, would you consider that to be an administrative function? Storage of tables and chairs that might be needed at other auditoriums within the school division or something of that sort?
Yes, it's simply because if you look at the argument of what are the schools under this division, I mean, it's not included. And secondly, it's an administrative function where they decided to centralize everything. Would it be a storage needs of a school? Which school? all of the schools under the school division. However, it's the function of the school division to decide whether they wanted it centralized or not. If there is for example, a broken chair, or as you mentioned, tables, chairs, or storage issue, they may be able to, without this property, they may be able to subcontract it somewhere else in a storage warehouse or whatever's cheaper, I don't know. Or maybe a vacant lot. They could just put a canopy or a removable storage unit. So in this case, it's storage outside of a brick and mortar school is an administrative function or administrative issue logistically.
So following that up, what about in a brick and mortar school? If they were to decommission their auditorium and use it for storage capacity for the specific school, would you consider that to be an administrative function?
Again, it's an
I know it's tough.
Yeah, it's hypothetical.
I just
it's
want
tough.
your opinion.
An auditorium, or let's say, for example, a gym, is something that is a need of that brick and mortar school. If you do that away, or for example, your hypothetical situation is an auditorium, would there be a slightest chance that would it be converted into a storage? I don't, from my perspective, I don't, because it's part of a curriculum where they're teaching arts, music, creativity on students. Would they convert a part of what's standing in the school? Is a hypothetical case. However, they can build another building within their school grounds to accommodate whatever needs they have. Having said that, I'm not sure. It's a tough call. It's a tough situation, hypothetical situation, Mr. Chair. In that case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for summation, gentlemen.
I'll just make one observation, and it really flows from the question you were asking and the question Mr. Therian asked about the definition of school building, and that phrase used solely or chiefly for the administrative functions, and a lot of the discussion stopped at that point. But of course, the legislation doesn't stop at that point. It goes on to say solely or chiefly for the administrative functions of the school division or the school district. And remember, I explained earlier that the way this section is set up, it starts by what's included within the definition of school building. Then it creates an exception to that. And the exception is for buildings used solely or chiefly for administrative functions, not of the school division or the school district. And as Mr. Borgstrom explained earlier, 395 Jefferson was the example of the Seven Oaks School Division. I'm going to call it the building where the superintendent is, the building where the treasurer of the school division is, what I'm going to call the senior administration, which every school division has. This is not intended to exclude, I'll suggest, a building of this type. These are not administrative functions of the school division that are happening in this building. This is the management of certain of the programming and the supply of the programming that happens out of this building. And there's a very important distinction between the administrative functions of the school division, because the administrative functions are those duties and obligations laid out in Section 41. But the actual carrying out of those obligations, the people who provide those services, if any of those services were housed in an actual school building, as they may well have been at one time, nobody would suggest that that portion of the building that houses a psychologist or an audiologist or a social worker should be taxable, even though the rest of it is not, because that's an administrative function. because it's not an administrative function. It's a supply of service. And so just to be clear, the definition of school building only accepts buildings that are used solely or chiefly for the administrative functions of the school division. So that's the division as a whole, and that's different than the supply of services, which is what's coming out of this building.
Thank you. Mr. Valderrama, desire for summation?
Yes, Mr. Chair. In determining a school building, as indicated by PSA, Public Schools Act, Mr. Chair, it was mentioned that if there are some hypothetical cases that were thrown or hypothetical situations that were thrown, if these functions in this property were to put in a school, would they be exempt or not? That portion would be exempt. It's not because of that function being there in the school. It's because it is a school in itself already. And also, if we look at the definition of a school building under the PSA or Public Schools Act, includes buildings required or used by school division or school district for the imparting of instruction. That is in the first sentence already, or the first section of that sentence. It means it has to impart an instruction in order to be considered as a school building, which is being what is being told to us by the Municipal Act under the 22(1)D. And having said that, yes, it's true that some buildings will be used chiefly or solely in the for the administrative functions of school division or school district. But that is the exemption, and which we both agree that it shouldn't be. Now the question is, what is in here in the 50 Monterey Road? Would a school exist on its own without the functions or the support system that's in here to impart an instruction? Would a school exist without whatever is in here in this subject property? My answer to you is yes, a school will exist. It will still continue to impart education and instruction to students. A school always has to have these teachers, students, principals. And as I was questioned earlier in one of the points, on my page 10, 41(1)(b)(1), yes, it is true that they are required to hire someone or get someone for, if I may quote, responsible behaviors or foster and maintains respectful and responsible behaviors in a school environment. Wouldn't that be a principal? Wouldn't that be teachers themselves? Wouldn't that be maybe a security in that school? It could be anyone, but they are in the school. They are serving the functions within the school building as defined by the Public Schools Act. And I think that's all the last words that I have, Mr. Chair and panel members. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Everyone's okay to continue on? Nobody needs a short break?
If I could request a 5 minute?
5
Short,
minutes, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please, Frank. Okay, I will call the hearing back to order. Next, we're going to deal with 900 St. Mary's Road. Once again, we have 3 points of contention. We will deal with the amount of assessed value first. So, Mr.
If I might again, as with the property at 50 Monterey, we do not dispute for the purposes of this hearing the amount of the assessment.
Okay. Having said that, then, Mr. Assessor, we'll still hear from you on the quantum, but we can keep it brief. Or just let us know how the value was established, and make sure you redo the roll number and file number, please.
Sounds good, Mr. Chair. Next property has a file number of 19-3209. It has a roll number of 0800292500. It is located at 900 St. Mary's Road. We're dealing with the roll year of 2020 using reference date of April 1st, 2018. The assessed value is $2,450,000. And I may lead you to page 3. That's where the subject property is. There's a couple of photos, aerial photos. And the assessment is determined as calculated on page 6 by the cost methodology. The land valuation has a net rate of $6.89 as determined by the model, and it has a net area of 130,634 square feet, giving it a land value of $900,000. The building has a valuation of $1,550,000. So the total valuation under the cost approach is $2,450,000, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Boardroom, you're not,
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Therian?
No questions, thank
Ms.
you.
Nesbitt?
No questions.
Thank you.
No questions, thank you. No further presentations from you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
regarding the
Amount of the assessment number.
Thank you. So therefore, we're going to deal with the classification and liability. Once again, I'm assuming it's Mr. Newman that we're going to hear from.
Well, if I might, I will go through
The description of the
a
property.
description of the property, its uses. I'm also going to tell you before I get into this, that this, we are seeking a partial exemption here. As I previously indicated, the administrative offices of the Louis Riel School Division are located here. I can tell you that that very closely parallels one of the cases we heard last Monday, where for the River East Transcona School Division, there is a property with its civic address of 589 Road, but its roll number actually refers to 491 Monroe, 2 schools and the administrative building. But within that administrative building were centralized print services and their IT department, which provides obviously computer service networking and hardware for the school division in its entirety. And I can also tell you that this board granted the partial exemption as we requested last Monday. So, having said all of that, I apologize. It feels like I got a sneeze, but I don't. This property is actually 3 separate structures, and I'll show you an overhead shot, which isn't particularly useful, but there's a better one at the rear. So if we take a look at our page 9, the bottom actually perhaps highlights it better, and you'll see in the bottom of page 9 in the picture on the very left-hand side is what I will describe as the auditorium associated with this facility. And the middle structure is the former Norbury School. And the structure on the very right-hand side is an addition that was placed on the building. It's I'll call it a bi-level addition. And the combined uses of this entire property are partially administrative in nature, which we do not argue should be exempt. We agree that they should be taxable, but there is a portion of the space that provides what I will say are services provided in support or for the needs of the public schools within this school division. So turning back to page 3, I can also tell you, I'll go over them in a moment, we also inspected this property. Mr. Dupuy, Mr. Hewitt, Mr. Newman and I inspected, along with the maintenance guy from Louis Riel, inspected this property also on April 1st of 2015, just before we went to Monterey, I believe. if I recall correctly. So within this school division, or within this building for the school division on page 3, this operating out of this location are student support services. There are library services which provide resource materials for teaching staff. There is a central print shop which also provides centralized digital printing, duplicating and finishing services for a large variety of classroom operational documentation. There are information systems which not only prepare the hardware for distribution to the schools, but also network connectivity within the schools within this school division. It includes everything from email, web and web filtering for the schools, repair and purchasing of equipment, computer equipment for the schools are all done within this department. Workplace safety and health, home economics and industrial arts provides planning, direction, and implementation for the safety and health of the students and employees and the students, and support, it should read staff, and support for home economics and industrial arts programs in the school division. It's also curriculum for various fields within this property. Now, turning to page 4, these, the figures shown in this chart here were actually provided by the Louis-Riel School Division. It relates only to the activities within this location. We've calculated roughly 20,336 square feet, or 41.5% of 4,920 square feet, which is the gross floor area of the structures. And that will be the basis for our, for which we are seeking the exemption. I'm just going to take you very quickly through our pictures starting at page 10. This is the auditorium. This is used from time to time. It is used for it's an auditorium. It's now their Legacy Conference Center. It's a little over 11,000 square feet in size in total. It's used primarily for seminars and teachers in services or special events and professional development for the school division. Page 11 are just different views of the same auditorium or conference center space. Similarly on page 12. Page 13, you'll see space there at the top for library support services. Bottom of page 13 is the print shop, which provides, again, centralized printing and binding for the school division for the schools. Student support services, you'll see there on page 14. You will see on pages 15 and 16 network services and information services. That's part of our IT department, and again, they provide the IT services necessary for the schools. And on page 17 is just some of the hardware, as I indicated earlier, they set up for the schools within the division. And so once they're done here, they ship them out for use within the schools. And so with that, I think I covered off the activities within this building. Just for your reference, our calculation based on the 2020 assessment would be an exempt or a 40E at $1,017,000, and the balance would be remaining as other or class code 60.
Thank you. Mr. Newman, were you going to be presenting something further?
Yes, so you've got the same brief, exemption brief, and I will not repeat everything I said in the prior submission, but I will just highlight that, as Mr. Boardroom has detailed in his description of the uses of the property, you've got support services that provide support to the planning, that guides the educators in identifying student needs. You've got library services that provides teaching resources, teaching resource materials for the teaching staff. You've got information systems that looks after the computer functions that are utilized in the schools. And if you look at page 4 of Mr. Borgstrom's submission, you can see that with respect to information systems, for example, a portion of that, 35%, has been allocated to the administrative side of the building. So in other words, it would remain taxable. And 65% has been allocated to the school support side, and that ultimately factors into his calculation of the exempt square footage. Similarly, you see down towards the bottom of that section of the chart, meeting rooms and computer lab, 2,311 square feet, and then again, that area has been allocated 20% to the administrative functions of the school division, therefore taxable, and 80% to supporting the schools, and therefore exempt. The argument is essentially the same, namely that in today's modern school age, with the obligations of the school divisions being what they are, school divisions have chosen to centralize services, and so the workplace safety and health programming, the home economics programming, the industrial arts programming, they have to make sure that as these courses are taught, they're done in a safe fashion, so they provide all the planning for that. There's curriculum planning that goes on here. These things are all necessary for today's modern school, and that's why the exemption, the partial exemption in this case, is being sought. It's on the same basis as the prior submission, that this building or the portion of this building falls within the definition of school building, because what is going on here falls within the context of buildings used for other public school purposes, and alternatively, but in addition, it falls within the definition of the French language, where these buildings and the portion for which the exemption is sought is used for the needs of a public school. So on both of those bases, we would ask you to grant the partial exemption that's being sought at the dollar amount that Mr. Borgstrom has indicated. And subject to questions, that would be my submission.
Thank you. Mr. Valderrama, questions for the applicant regarding the submission?
No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Therian?
Yes, I have. And I guess my first reaction was, you're either in or out of the exemption. So now we're looking at partial. And so that's where I'm struggling, I guess. I looked at your page, Mr. Newman, your presentation on pages 8, and obviously I don't have to look at the French version again, I know what it is. The heading, and I don't know where that's, if you're hanging your head on that, page 6, 22.1 of the, no, not this one.
It's tab 1.
It's, no, yeah, tab 1, I'm sorry.
The legislation.
Yeah. Are you hanging your hat on the heading real property partial exemptions? How can you argue it's either in or out, now it's partial? That's really the only thing that is bugging me on how we approach something like this.
Right. So, no, I'm not hanging my hat on that phrase, partial exemption. And And, you know, unfortunately, I don't have the entirety of the legislation with me. But I really don't think there's an issue about the concept of what I'll call a partial exemption. So, for example, there's a maximum of 4.047 hectares or 10 acres that applies to this provision. There is the odd school property that goes over that, and so you run into a circumstance where a portion of the property is exempted because it falls within the 10 acres or 4.047 hectares, and then the balance of it is not. So there's a partial exemption being achieved because of a size limitation. And I think that's why you see on the heading of section 22 the concept of partial exemptions, because a number of the exemptions bring with them size limitations. This one is not about a size limitation, it's about a use limitation. And you know, and additionally, the legislation, of course, contemplates partial exemptions in the sense of a school tax only exemption. We're not dealing with that here, but that's section 23, for example. So I think our legislation recognizes generally these concepts. And the other thing I would do, if the panel would allow me, is I would go to what I'm going to call my computer, and I'm going to look up the legislation, if the board will allow me.
I do have a copy of the legislation. If
The entire legislation?
which section do you need? Or
Everything between 20 and 26.
20 and 26. I think I have the 26 until 26.
Yeah.
It's, I'll give you that.
You do have it all. Section 26.2. 26.2. Where, and this will answer your question, Mr. Therrien, it's not there, but Ms. Nesbitt, I think, has the entirety.
Yeah, get that.
Where a portion of land is used for purposes for which an exemption is available under section 22. The exemption applies to the portion of the taxation that applies to land in a proportion that reflects the portion of land that is required for the exempted use. And then 26.1 is to the same effect for the building. So 26.1 and 26.2 in combination, what they contemplate is a partial exemption based on the use. And I think that will fully answer your concern, Mr. Thayer.
To me, that's what I was concerned about in my question. So 26.1 and 26.2
Yes.
are the sections you're referring to.
Yeah.
My colleague has it here. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, that's all I had.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt.
I have a question. I'm looking at your page 4 of the Altus brief, combined with page 3 of the Altus brief, the narrative. Approximately half of the square feet that you're proposing would be exempt, relates, I think, to the Legacy Center, the auditorium.
I would agree with that, yes.
About 10,000 square
Yes.
feet-ish.
Yeah.
On page 3, where it's noted that it's 11,185 square feet,
Yeah.
it says it's used primarily for seminars, teachers, and services, special events, and professional development. What are special events? Are they school-only related? Are they open to the community? What are they?
As I understand it from the school division, they do allow outside groups to come in and use that facility. One example, I don't think I've included it in here, one example was an outside speaker. It was related to, I don't have it in here and I don't want to be guessing. They do occasionally, certainly not frequently, from my understanding, allow outside groups to come in and use the space for related purposes. It's not for related purposes. It's not used for, you can't have a social in there, for example, and that sort of thing, but they do occasionally allow outside groups to use the facility.
And I'm quite familiar with schools allowing what I'm going to call community events to happen within schools. I can think most recently, for example, my daughter is in a dance group, and her dance group, in combination with Rusalka, the Seven Oaks School Division, the Garden City Collegiate facility, has a theater in it, and they were allowed to come in and use that theater and do their performances in that theater. I know that the Maples Collegiate, because I was at it, there was an open house being held by the City of Winnipeg relating to a planned expropriation, and they held a community event for people who would be affected by it at this school in the auditorium, so they could come in and see the placards describing the nature and extent of the expropriation. So what I'm saying ultimately, and it's addressing your question, is it's not unusual that community events do happen in school buildings.
I appreciate that. And in other school buildings, the primary use of the facility is clearly a school. Very
fair comment.
But here, that's the questionable part.
Yes.
And it would otherwise not be used for education of students. Specifically, it would be for other sorts of activities. Yeah, okay,
I agree with your statement.
Okay, I was just trying to understand that use of that building. Thank you.
Thank you. On your page 4, where you've done your calculation, 20,336 square feet. I'm assuming your math is correct. I went through it quickly, but I couldn't come to that number. But
Well, just to be clear, there is some proportional space.
no, I understand that.
Yeah.
So 65% and 80%. But apart from that, it says square footage not included, 19,738 square feet. What is that?
As it says, boiler rooms, common areas, hallways, stairwells.
Yeah, but that says 9738. So is that just a typo? The 19?
Yes, sorry, there should not be a 1 in front of that.
Okay, so that's
Yeah, my
9738.
apologies.
And that being the case, should it not be the percentage based on the actual area of 39,262? Boiler rooms, common areas, hallways, whatever, would that not be something that's, should be shared?
Well, and so that's why I would suggest that it's absolutely proportional. If you think about it, the boiler rooms and the common areas and the hallways and the stairwells are not used for administrative purposes. Rather, they are shared for access of the spaces. They are shared for heating of the space. So I would certainly submit that that space is appropriate to be included on a pro rata basis.
I think that was my only question, other than the 491 Monroe earlier said there were exemptions granted.
Yes.
But it's actually a partial exemption that was granted.
That's correct, yeah. And it was about 1/3 of the space in that location.
And did that include hallways and boiler room?
You know, I don't recall off the top of my head. We used the numbers that were provided by River East Transco and School Division.
And how did those numbers, what was the aggregate of those? Did it include common areas? I can take that over.
Yeah, and I don't recall exactly.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Valderrama, Mayor from you, please, regarding the liability classification issue.
Yes,
Yes, Mr. Chair. It's the same presentation, and the list of schools that I've provided is also the same. It's Louis School Division, same as the previous property. And all the classification and liability presentation that I had previously would apply, and it's just the same thing.
Is there anything specific to this property?
None. We're still in a position, or I'm still in a position where it is. I still believe that it is part of administrative function of the school division and not part of any curriculum or imparting of instructions of the school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Going to be questioning the assessor.
Yeah, I believe all of the questions have been asked and answered.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
And I will take them as asked and answered as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Can I give you 15 seconds of summation?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
So
You can.
this property is an example of, and is recognized by the appellant, of where a portion of the property is used solely or chiefly for the administration of the school division. And that's why the exemption is not sought in respect of a substantial portion of this property. And I only mention that just to highlight the language of the definition of school building, which we discussed somewhat earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Valderrama, sorry for summation.
Mr. Chair, whilst it is true and clear that there is the administrative part of use of this property, the not so clear is the administrative, the other functions that is in here in this property, and which we believe are still part of the administrative function of a school division. And that's my submission, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next we will deal with 760 Kildare Avenue.
If I might, that we do have a disagreement with respect to the amount of assessment on the, in two parts.
Okay, so I would prefer to deal with classification and liability
Yes,
first.
and then perhaps Mr. Newman can be excused. To be clear, we do not dispute the valuation of what I will call the building on the northeast corner of this site. If you're familiar with the site, there's a standalone structure on the northeast corner of the site that I will describe to you later as housing student support services exclusively. There is also, we don't dispute the amount of that assessment, but we do have a disagreement with the assessor with respect to the amount or the rate applied to the lands in excess of the statutory exemption. If that makes sense.
I guess we'll deal with that one.
Okay.
So, Mr. Newman, you want to walk us through
Yes.
760 Kildare?
So
Sorry, before we do that, perhaps we'll just say that this is file number 193326, 760 Kildare Avenue East, roll number 09001577500, correct?
If you want.
So let me take you to Mr. Boardroom's brief. Let me take you to page 4, an overhead photo. You'll see the red teardrop, and there's a separate building right by the red teardrop. That is the building we're talking about.
The green teardrop?
Red? You have the green teardrop? Page 4?
I'm sorry, yours.
Okay. Yeah, be going.
Too many teardrops. Thank you.
And actually, if you go to page 7 is a little bit larger. So again, it's the building on the left-hand side. that we're speaking about. So the question becomes what goes on in this building. And if we then turn to page 16 in the lower right-hand corner, the hand-numbered 16.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're the same situation where we're dealing with a partial exemption, is that correct?
No.
It's the entire building?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Can I just ask you, building number 1 relates to which assessment?
So let me take you back, just for clarification, let me take you back to our page 7. And there are 4 pins that have been dropped, but there are 3 outlined areas. There is an outlined area right in the middle of the picture, outlined in green. Those are the lands that we'll be talking about. Those are taxable lands that we'll be talking about the value. We don't dispute the classification on those.
And what is the current classification?
That's
60 or 40?
40 taxable, yeah.
40.
And then directly to the left of that is Murdoch Mackay Collegiate, which is it's fully exempt from taxation as a school. And directly above that, along Redonda Street, and what you'll see above that is Kildare, right at the top of the picture. That has a yellow pin on it with the wording Student Services Unit. That is 60T currently. And that is the student, what we say houses student-related services. There is nothing administrative that goes on in this building. School division offices are located, as I indicated earlier, on the roll number associated with 491 Monroe.
Okay, I think we have it now.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
It is helpful, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's quite all right. So that brings us to page 16 of Mr. Borgstrom's brief. And this is an excerpt from the River East Transcona School Division website. And the heading in the photo is Student Services. And if you read just below that, we believe all students can and that all students want to learn. Staff in our student service unit based out of 2 locations, the Polson unit located in Polson School and the Kildare unit located at 760 Kildare Avenue East. So this is what we are talking about, the Kildare unit at 760 Kildare Avenue East. And it then goes on to provide a description of the various services that are provided, the various types of consultants who are used by the school division, a student reentry consultant, those students who have been removed from the traditional school, how do we get them back in, the attendance officer, early years behavior coach, inclusion teachers, also coordinating the divisional aquatics program, bowling league, music therapy, classroom-based support to teachers related to universal design for learning, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, psychologists, reading clinicians, social workers, speech-language pathologists. Sounds a lot like 50 Monterey in terms of what goes on, and it's very similar to what we did last Monday at 491 Monroe and 1075 Wellington. So that's what goes on in this building. And if you turn to page 18, you can see highlighted in yellow a reference to the Student Services Unit at 760 Kildare. That's what we're talking about. Just below that is the Student Services Unit Olson. That's the 491 Monroe property that was dealt with last week and in respect of which the exemption was granted. Partial. So at the end of the day, we come back to the same legal provisions we've referred you to already. Clearly, these are resources necessary for the provision of what I'll call a full and well-rounded educational experience for the students. It provides support to them in a variety of respects. And I would again say to you that this building is used in the context of the definition of school building as a building that is used for other public school purposes. And of course, within the context of the French language, I would say to you that clearly this building is used for the needs of a public school. This building is all about and only about the needs of the students and how those needs in a whole variety of respects can be addressed to make sure that their needs, both from a physical, mental, health, well-being perspective, are addressed and provided for to enhance ultimately the educational experience. And I don't think I could say more about it, frankly, without repeating myself.
Thank you. Mr. Valderrama, any questions?
No further questions aside from the ones I asked previously.
Asked and answered, thank you. Mr. Thurian?
Questions?
Ms. Nesbitt?
I have no questions.
I do have a question. On page 18, where it's listed administrative offices, educational maintenance, student services Kildare, which is this subject property, student services Polson, which is the one we've heard several times already that there was a partial exemption. What is the difference between the functions at 491 Monroe and the functions at 760 Kildare?
So let's be, if I might, let's be entirely clear. The student services unit, the school division itself indicates that they are located within Polson School, which falls on the site encompassed at 491 Monroe. The student services unit in that location is located within Polson School. That school has a complete exemption from taxation. What I was talking about for the administrative offices with the civic address of 589 Road, or Rock, if you will, which are on the west end of that rather large site. That's where the partial exemption came in, and the partial exemption was granted with respect to IT services and centralized printing. It was not the student support services in that building. To be clear, the student support services are located within Polson School, according to the literature of the school division. And in fact, when you look on page 16, in the very first paragraph, in the very first line underneath the little picture that says student services, you'll see at the end of the first sentence there, based out of two locations, the Polson unit located in Polson School. And I can tell you, as I've already said, that particular building is 100% exempt.
So when you say that there was partial exemption granted, the remainder of it was already exempt?
There are two schools and a separate office building on that site.
Right.
Both schools are 100% exempt. The office building is taxable, and this board granted a partial exemption based on the occupancy of that separate office building, the separate occupancy, the rated occupancy of the print shop and IT services within that building, about 1/3 of the space.
And what was the other 2/3 used for?
Administrative purposes, and we did not argue that that should not be taxable.
Of the school division as a whole.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think I got to clarify.
Mr. Valderrama, is there anything that you wanted to add that you haven't dealt with in your previous ones?
It's almost the same. It's just the only difference is the list of schools that's in here. This one's River East Transcona, and on pages 8 and 9, it's that's the list of the schools in the River East Transcona, and that's the only difference. Other than that, it's the same presentation and arguments put forward in the previous properties that we dealt with earlier.
Thank you. Who's going to be questioning the assessor or nothing?
No question.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
Thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt?
No questions.
Okay, and so your page 8 and 9, your contention is because it's not listed by the school division as a school, it doesn't qualify as a school. Is that what you?
The list is the schools in the Transcone, or River East Transcone School Division.
Summation.
Only because the issue of the partial exemption perhaps created a little bit of confusion, which Mr. Boardroom's hopefully clarified and cleared up. Last Monday, we also dealt with 1075 Wellington, Winnipeg School Division number 1, exactly like this. It's a resource building purely in the sense of providing resources of various types, similar to what's done here to Winnipeg School Division. Wholly exempt, no issue of partial or not. This building at 760 Kildare is no different. It's purely a resource. In today's modern age, we don't have school divisions functioning without all these additional resources. It's part of the holistic overall approach that we take to education today. It should be.
Thank you. Mr. Valderrama, desire for summation?
It's the same summation that I had. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. At this point, are we excusing Mr. Newman?
I'm done.
Okay, thank you for your
Thank you so
presentation
much.
today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not leaving, I'm just kidding.
Okay, we also have to deal with the amount of the assessed value, so Mr. Assessor, are you ready?
My apologies, just to be clear, the amount of the assessed value that we refer to here deals with the land portion of the assessment, so 40T only.
So we can limit the amount of assessed value discussion strictly to the land component? Okay. Mr. Assessor, if you would give us your evidence regarding the land of this property then, please?
Which portion of the classification and liability we're dealing with? The 800,000 or the 700,000? I just want to clarify.
So, yeah, so if
there are three in here.
Let me skip ahead, and it's, well, then it's on your page as well.
Yes.
So the institutional property is the $803,000. Those are, that's the land, that's associated with the lands above the statutory exemption and lands that are not included under other property. So the other property, we argue the entire $711,000 should be exempt. We do not disagree with the $9,161,000 for the institutional property exempt. That's Merlot High School proper, 10 acres of land. It is only the $803,000 that we have at issue here.
If I may, the $803,000 is merely the result of land that's over and above what's allowed as an exemption.
That's correct.
So it's the land value we're dealing with. It would be the entire land that we're dealing with, and then it would be the area over and above what's allowed. Is that not correct?
No, because the lands associated, and certainly the assessor, and I'll be asking the assessor about it, but the lands associated with the $803,000 are rearage. So it's the rearage area that we're talking about here. And I'll go over the diagram again on page 7. But yeah, so it's perhaps the assessor could describe it as well.
Okay. So, Mr. Assessor, on page 7, you've got your land with three components attached to it. So that's what we're dealing with? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, you may proceed.
Okay, if I may just read through the file number again, Mr. Chair. It's
No, you don't have to. We've gone
okay,
through that.
right, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on page 7, we have 3 land classification and liability allocations. The first one has a 33.5 2.26%, with a land area of 285,061 square feet. That's a valuation of $803,000, which is classified as a 40 institutional with a liability of taxable. And I believe that's the one that's being contested here. And the other two, the second one has a 15.9% allocation with a land area of 136,249 square feet. And the land valuation is $384,000. It has a classification of 60T and the liability taxable T. And the third one has a 50.834% land allocation. That's an area of 435,604 square feet. It has a land value of $1,227,000. It has a class code of 40 institutional and a liability of exempt based on MAA or Municipal Assessment Act 22-1D. Sorry. So if I may refer you to page 6, this is where the land rate or net rate per square foot is. The model determined land rate or net rate for the entire land is $2.82 per square foot. And it is zoned as a PR3. And I have some land sale comparables on page 4. They're all ranging from $7.25 up to $19.51. Their zoning varies from RR5 to agricultural to residential mixed use. And on page 3 are some aerial photos of the subject property. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bork, for the questions to this.
I do, thank you. So let's start on your page 6. And you indicated that the overall rate is $2.82 a square foot, right?
Correct.
Now, as we look at the site on your page 5, and it's a little difficult to make out, but at the top diagram, at the intersection of Kildare and Uganda, that's the Student Support Services building we were just talking about, right?
Correct.
And immediately below that, or to the south of that, is Murdoch Mackay School, right?
Correct.
Those all have lands underlying, and when you're looking at lands, would you agree that lands fronting on streets would carry a higher rate?
Correct.
And in fact, where you have very large parcels with lands fronting on streets, and including some rearage lands, there would very likely be differential rates applied to it by the city. I'm not talking about the overall rate, but differential rates to arrive at an overall rate.
There's a likelihood, yes.
Yes, okay. Now, in terms of services, if we're talking about the rearage here, there are no services available to the rearage other than across or underneath the current development on Redondo, right?
I'm not sure about the services.
Now,
I don't know.
directly below, the green area directly below the little hand cursor, that's an old folks home, correct?
I'm sorry, which one?
On your page 5,
Mm-hmm.
directly below Murdoch Mackay School, on a separately outlined area, that's a seniors complex?
I am not familiar, I don't know.
But that's not owned by the school division, right?
It's a different home number. I'm not sure who the owner is.
Okay. And as we look on the right-hand side of your diagram here, there are some other areas separately outlined in green. You see that?
Yes.
You'd agree with me that those are not owned by the school division, right?
Has a different roll number. I'm not sure who the owner is.
Okay. Now, on your page 4, you've referenced the number of sales, and in fact dating all the way back to 2012, right?
Correct.
Now, you're aware, are you not, that the lands on the west side of Rothshire Drive, and now shown as residential development, those lands sold in late 2012, did they not?
Or Rothschild, I don't know,
You're-
I'm not sure.
You recall I gave you the sheet with the sale information on it, right?
Yeah, I don't remember what
Okay,
the
fair
details
enough.
of it.
And I've included it in my sales, so that's fine. So if we take a look at your page 4, you show 3 separate sales. And the first sale is in Ridgecrest, that's in north on Main Street, correct?
Yes, correct.
And in fact, that site was subsequently developed with multi-res project, was it not?
I don't know what happened to
No,
it.
it was available for immediate development, correct?
I am not sure, I don't know the.
And if we take a look at the other 2 sales, those are both along Sterling Line Parkway, right?
Looks like it, yes.
Yeah. And so those sales may well have been, those sales were part of the ongoing development in that area, correct?
Correct.
And there might have been a subsequent zoning change to allow things like the mall and commercial development along Sterling Line.
I'm not sure when the zoning change happened, but I'm pretty sure maybe it happened after.
And
the same.
you'll agree with me that the zoning on the subject property is PR3 Parks and Recreational, correct?
Correct.
Now, do you know what a development is available under that zoning designation?
I'm not really 100% sure, I don't know.
In fact, you're allowed schools, you would be allowed community clubs, but not much else, right?
Yes.
And so as those lands, being rearage lands, very likely development would not be allowed on that site, correct?
Correct.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sterian, questions for the assessor?
Well, I would just look at it as land sales comparable. I don't know if how useful they are in respect to the subject, so. Really, it's only a comment. I guess that's the best you could come up with, I guess.
Yes, I tried to find agricultural, residential, rural residential with, and PR3 sales, but these are the best ones I could find.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Nesbitt?
I had the same
Thank you.
concern about the comparables, yeah. So no questions.
Okay. So the reason you selected those was based on size, primarily? The
Yes,
subject being
correct.
like a 20-acre site, so you looked at sites that you thought were closest in comparison?
Yeah, that's
And
correct.
it's normally sites that size that are for redevelopment, is it not?
Yes, usually, yes, correct.
There were none in the Transcona area near the reference gate that you're aware of?
I'm not sure if there are, aside from retail and industrial sales. So I tried to really limit it according to the size, and as much as possible, I tried to look for parks or PR3 zoned lands, but there's not much in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Boardroom?
Thank you. I will be very brief on this one. There are a number of sales that I've considered, and we show those on page 8. The most relevant sale in my mind is the very last one, and you recall I asked the assessor. If we look at the assessor's map, that includes this area right here. At the time of the sale in 2012, it was zoned park. It was not owned by the school division. At that time, I can tell you that in November of 2012, it sold at a rate of $1.89 square foot. Those were lands that had services available along Rothschild. Those were lands that were immediately developed subsequent to that, which is why you now see those subdivided lands showing up on the assessor's brief on his page 5. There are a number of other sales of large parcels. I understand and appreciate the assessor's difficulty. There just aren't sales of park zone lands. Why is that? Because they're typically owned by community clubs, school divisions, or the city. They're used for recreation purposes. We're trying to value recreationally zoned lands here. We're trying to value the rearage of those lands based on the site, and I've already described to you from our picture on page 7. And based on those sales, and I've included a number of municipal board precedents here. I'm not going to go over them, but I will leave you to read them at your leisure on pages 19 and following. I've highlighted a number of sections. Essentially, the municipal board has found on a number of past occasions that rearage or landlocked lands carry a rate significantly less than what I would describe as normal lands. Based on all of that, our suggested rate for the rearage lands is $1 a square foot. Now you can allocate a higher value to the frontage lands and a lower value to the rearage lands, but it is in fact the 40T lands that we are trying to value here, and so that's why I've suggested the rate for those lands of $1 a square foot. And with that, I am open to questions.
Thank you. Mr. Valderrama, questions for the applicant?
Yes. With regard to the exemption limit that's stated under 22(1)D, is there any indication in the section 22(1)D where the area of the land over and above what's allowable as an exemption?
Well, in this particular case, we have some guidance because we have it separately assessed as other, or cost level 60 of the student support services building. That will also carry a land portion with it. So there is clearly, there isn't a particular guideline within the legislation, but common sense needs to prevail.
Of course.
The lands underneath the student support services building are not exempt because of their use.
Right.
The lands around the school, and I've calculated or laid out an area here around the school, 10 acres in size, give or take, plotting it on that map. So the remaining lands, or the remainder of the lands, are north or rearage, and that's certainly what I would suggest would be the lands. Certainly the lands under the school and the parking lot, et cetera, would all fall under the 10-acre exemption. And what we're left with are the rearage lands, which would carry a different rate, in my view.
In your view. So the one that you consider at the back, is that being used as a soccer field or maybe by the students just to run around?
It is. Well, I can actually speak to that from personal experience because when I used to coach my son's soccer team, play games on the site, and it is in fact for public use, fields for soccer teams.
So there's no indication in the act, and it's just the back portion of the land is being used by students or some community activities.
Well, I mean, when you look at the areas calculated here, you've got a very, Murdoch Mackay, my son went to Miles Mac. Murdoch Mackay is a very large school, and you can see there its footprint. And so what we're left with, when you take away those 10 acres, what you're left with is in fact more or less the village. Take away the student services building, take away the school, that's what you're left with as a residual, is the rearage.
Or maybe we can value the one at the front too.
And the value at the front, I would suggest, would carry a higher rate. There would be no doubt of that in my mind, and that's why we've come up with the valuation that we have.
No, in terms of what's more than allowable in the exemption, it
Well,
would
no,
be the
I-
front part too, or just half of this? It could
No.
be anything.
So
right?
on our page 7, what I did was I actually did the calculations using Google Earth, and you can set up a polygon around an area, you can come up with calculations square footage. That's what I did here.
And that's the questions I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zurarian.
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Nesbitt.
You mentioned the municipal board order,
Yep.
page 19.
I'm following, not exactly on point, but it does talk about rear ridge and landlocked lands.
It does. But it didn't really talk about rates and things. It
Yeah,
just
no,
said
and
lower.
it's not on point, yeah.
So
but
then,
it's-
yeah, how did you come up with the $1 then?
You need to consider things like development horizon, the zoning on those properties, on that property with PR3. The question becomes, would development be allowed at all on that site? There are a number of, not only factors, but risk factors involved with trying to come up with a calculation, but as PR3 lands, I thought that was an appropriate route given the village.
Okay, thank you.
So there is nothing to point us as far as decisions,
Not on point, no.
saying that certain portions over and above the exemption can be identified where they are.
I have never, and I'm not familiar with any such decision.
Okay, thank you. Desire for summation on the evaluation?
Yes, I've mentioned, I mean, in the questioning, there was no indication in the act. We were just mandated to calculate what is over and above what the allowable exemption area in the act is, specifically 22(1)(b). And so, that being said, whether it is rear ridge or not, where it is actually in the property does not indicate, or is not indicated in the act. And so, with that, I just end my submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boardroom?
I think that we've highlighted the points that we wanted to make.
Thank you.
Could you give me a sec to send the text?
Certainly.
And, Mr. Chair, if I may use my phone to calculate some of the, just for calculator purposes. Or
Let's
if I can borrow.
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute break here, please. I'll call the meeting back to order. We may as well continue in the order they are, so we'll deal with item number 7 next, which on mine shows as no address, so roll number 0400-181-6500. And the remaining 2 properties, or 3 properties rather, are just the amount of assessed value we're dealing with. Thank you.
Sure, Mr. Chair.
You may proceed when you're ready.
So I mentioned the property is file number 19-3329, and I have a recommendation on this property, Mr. Chair.
What is that recommendation?
$456,000,
And what is that based on?
based on $2.69 per square foot of land rate.
Mr. Borgstrom, you're aware of this
I
recommendation?
became aware this morning, and I've not had time to convey this to my client or receive instruction, but we will not oppose the recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns from the panel, Mr. Thieren?
No, thank you, sir.
Ms. Nesbitt?
No questions, no.
I don't. So you're not making a further presentation, Mr.
No.
Borgstrom? Thank you. So let's jump back up to item number 2 then. Which is 450 Nathaniel. When you're ready, Mr. Mr. Assessor, roll your name, please.
Yeah, the next property has a file number of 19-3939, a roll number of 12014227600, and it is located at 450 Nathaniel Street. And I would like to make a recommendation on this one, Mr. Chair.
What is your recommendation?
$1,321,000. $1,321,321.
For what?
Oh, for the institutional taxable
Thank you.
portion.
To the cost code 40 taxable, which is now 1,944,000, is that correct? Currently in
Yes,
the roll?
that's correct.
And you're recommending, sorry,
$1,321,000.
and that's based on what?
$4 land rate per square foot.
Thank you. Mr. Borgstrom, you're aware of this?
Yeah, I came over this morning, but I just have a couple of very short questions for the assessor.
Okay.
So there's no change to the exempt component, correct?
None.
And those are the lands associated with Grand Park High School, right?
450 Nathaniel?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what we're talking about here is a reduction to the rear ridge lands, right?
Just on the
Just on the rear ridge
land that's over and above the exempted.
I don't have plan instruction, but we will not oppose the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there any questions or concerns?
That's based on the $4?
$4 per square foot, yes.
Okay, that's all, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Nesbitt?
Any questions?
I have nothing. So no further presentation?
Excuse me.
No, thank you.
No. So that'll bring us to 595 La Jamoutier. When you're ready, please, Mr. Cesar.
I'm just going to double check my calculations, Mr. Chair. So the next property has a roll number of 19-2473. It has a roll number 0609315500. It is located at 595 La Jamoutier Boulevard. And I'm prepared to make a recommendation on the institutional taxable portion only, Mr. Chair.
And your recommendation is what?
$2,827,000 on the institutional taxable component.
$2,827,000. Thank you. What's that based on?
$1.50 per square foot of land rate.
Thank you. Mr. Borgstrom?
Again, I came over this morning, I don't have plan instruction. We're not opposing and won't be making a submission.
Thank you. Mr. Therian, any questions, concerns?
I'm just curious, the appellant did not have the same, I don't know what rate you used, I don't know if it's proper to ask, you had 198? Is it proper to ask that question, Mr. Chairman, or not?
Well, we haven't seen any evidence to that effect, so.
Okay, okay. We'll just leave it at that then?
I have no questions.
Okay, we'll leave it at that, thank you.
Thank you. And you stated, Mr. Borgstrom, you're not making a further presentation?
We are not, thank you.
Thank you. With that will conclude the properties we have to deal with. So thank you both for the presentations today, and the orders will be coming out in due course. I'll call the meeting to a close.